All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm happy you're alive and here on a Monday evening, April 15th. It's tax day. I know that's a pain in the wherever, right? But we live in a great country, so I'm glad to be here and be alive. Anyway, it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Dr. Frederick Templeman. And just gosh, I had to look back at my uh, calendar, Dr. T. It's already been 5 weeks since we've been back. I can't believe 5 weeks have already blown by. But I had the pleasure to drive across country with Dr. Templeman, and he told. I'll tell you what, if you ever get to sit down, have a meal, have a cup of coffee, whatever, ask them about some of the stories because I heard some wild stories uh, about Dr. Templeman, and you begin to appreciate people a lot better when you hear their background, where they've been, what they've been up to all their life. Even as a kid, we went back that far, but it was fun, realizing the amount of background that Dr. Templeman has in his life, and where he's lived around the world and things like that, where he's traveled to, and the extensive background he has. I hope you can appreciate when you hear him and realize the background that he has. And I've known Dr. T for about 21, 22 years now, and known of him, but now I feel like I know more about him than ever, just over driving across country with him. But let me just fill you in a quick few things. And then I'll shut up here. Uh, he was previously a Canadian ambassador. What do you got to think about that kind of a background and the places that he lived. And I heard some of the stories where he was, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And then he moved on in his career, becoming an MD in the US and in Canada. He's phytoceutical, and I'm going to slaughter this, phytonutraceutical research that he is president of. He's an author of books, and now currently, and thank God that he's, a consultant with us because he has this huge background of knowledge that he can share with CTFO, and he can share with all of us. So I'm going to let him just take it from here. We got a few slides we're going to talk about. And so let me pull those up and share those.
Now, Tom, just keep me on track, and if I start to go over time or too far off course, ask me a question or just tell me to shut up.
Okay.
We had a great time coming across. One time we were coming down about a 50-mile slope where the road would narrow and widen to allow the big trucks to pass. And we slipped into a situation where the RV was stuck in the second gear. And we must have had 100 trucks behind us before we finally got off the side of the road. And that was in the middle of the night.
All right. I think our slides are showing. Can you see the slides, Doctor?
I see the slides, and I've got them a larger view here where I am, so I can read for them because I'd be hard put to read that. People may not be able to, depend on what they're looking at as a device. They may not be able to read that completely, in which case I would suggest they just take screenshots and then take them down a little bit and look at them with a larger view, because they're good slides. They're not my slides, they're Colley's slides, but it's pretty important stuff. And I thought I might preface this evening by saying that I want people to understand a little bit of the theoretical background of what we're talking about with medicine and with supplementation. There are two theories. One of them has taken over the other one to a large extent. But in the last couple of decades, and certainly in the future, the second theory is coming back into place as being as important, if not more important. And those two theories are the germ theory. And this is the one that began with Dr. Lister years ago, I mean, a century ago, in fact, more than that, when he was discovering that if you washed your hand as a doctor who was doing surgeries or delivering babies, that fewer people died of infections afterwards. And so that became what was called the germ theory of medicine. And that's worth looking up. Somebody should just look that up and go to AI and say, give me a brief understanding about the germ theory of medicine. And then there was a second theory, which came about not long afterwards, but was eclipsed a bit by the germ theory. And that was called the terrain, TERRAIN theory of medicine. And again, I would suggest that you go to AI and you just ask them to talk about it a little bit, because what the one is the idea of the current medical idea that dominates is that everything that goes wrong with the human body is kind of sort of like an infection. Now that's an oversimplification, and it isn't true, but it is what predominates in terms of how medicine views disease and the approach to disease. And that is that they can find a drug, because drugs are the direct derivatives of the germ theory. We started out with antibiotics, which were directly related to germs or microorganisms which cause disease. And that was that if you could get the right antibiotic or the right antifungal, you would be able to destroy the organism which was causing the disease. Now, that's the basic principle of medicine today. And so even when we're not talking about infectious disease, when we're talking about heart disease, or when we're talking about diseases that we don't understand all that well, such as Alzheimer's disease or dementia, the idea is, unfortunately, grasped so tightly within the talons of modern medicine that we're still looking for that one thing that will go into the body and make one little change, the silver bullet, and that the disease will be knackered at the knees and either disappear or the body will take over. But it's not a particularly good view of medicine. It's very reductionistic and it's very materialistic. I much prefer a view of medicine that goes more towards the terrain theory. And the terrain theory is that the body and the mind, being the place where life takes place and where disease is found, that if you can strengthen the terrain, the body, the mind, that you can obviate the necessity of becoming deathly ill. And so I'll give you an example. When we had the COVID problems, there were largely two groups of thought again, and one predominant one, which was the reductionistic sort of materialistic theory that all we have to do is to get the vaccine, or all we have to do is to find the drug which will wipe out the COVID, in this case, virus, and then we're all set. And we saw how well that worked. In fact, I don't want to get on a philosophical hobby horse here, but I will say that the people who chose the alternative to that, which was do what you can to strengthen the body and let the body look after itself. And so people who began to use supplements, and I would refer primarily to vitamin D and vitamin C, etc. But those who took things that were going to strengthen the body actually did well. And they did better than anybody who was trying to find the silver bullet that was going to wipe away COVID, because we didn't ever get a vaccine. What we have has changed the definition of vaccine. It is not a vaccine according to standard definitions. They had to change it in order that they could stay within the law. But that's a striking difference that is something we need to get our heads around when we start using supplements, because supplements in a very interesting way, and I don't know whether you can see me anymore or not. Can you still see me, Tom?
Yes, we're fine.
You can see me. So you see me waving my arms around everything.
Yes, we can see you. We can see you waving.
Okay, all right. So you need to get your heads around that, because supplements work on both sides of the question. They work on the medical side, where we've got something that we're going to put into the body that the body absolutely needs to counter the effects of disease. And it works on the idea that the body by itself is a very, very wise organism, and that it will do everything it possibly can until the last breath to stay alive. And that if we give it what it needs in adequate amounts, which is getting tougher to do when we're talking about food and nutrients in a world with diminishing fertility and all kinds of pollution, etc. But if we give the body what it needs, it will do the job. And very often doctors, at least I certainly did as a primary care physician, I would sometimes give a prescription to people, and I knew pretty well it wasn't going to make any difference, but the time and the body would make the difference, and therefore I would get the credit. And I know that that sounds awful, but it's exactly what doctors, nurse practitioners, and everybody else who gives an antibacterial to someone who comes in with a viral infection. The antibiotic does absolutely nothing. The body takes about a week to 10 days to be able to ramp up the things that it needs to fight the viral infection. So the doctor would write the prescription, the people would take it, and then 5 days later they'd be feeling well, and they thought, man, the doctor did the job. But it wasn't. It was the body that did the job. And so very often medicine is ready to take credit for all kinds of things that it hasn't done. Now, I don't want to run down medicine and make you think that you shouldn't do things like that. For example, if I was in a car accident and it was terrible and they had to, pry me out of the remains of my vehicle with the jaws of life, and that's not the time I'm going to yell, give me a XanthoMyst. That's not at all what you want to do. You want to go to the emergency room, get all of the things that regular medicine does so well in the short term. But if you ignore the rest of the scenario, if you ignore the terrain, if you do not do what is necessary to give your body to be able to operate at a reasonable degree of efficacy, you're going to have real problems. Now, let's go to this first slide. And we're going to be talking now about the fact that these two products have terrain effects. In other words, they're going to go into the body and they're going to provide nutrients to the body, and the body will decide where to send them and where the problems are in your individual body. Trust your body. It will pick up the right things from what you put in it. And if you've got enough, or if you're giving things that it needs, then you'll see differences. But that's the terrain effect of these two things. And the XanthoMyst, which is a mangosteen product, and mangosteen is, that's the trumpet I've blown for a long time now, because I was able to replace about 16 to 17 medications that I normally wrote prescriptions for with just this natural extract from a plant. And that's the terrain effect. And it really did work extremely well. Now, the GlutaMyst is something which is closer to the medical side. It is principally made by the body. Now, we can make it outside the body. And in the case of this particular product, the glutamine that we start with, glutathione that we start with, is pharmaceutical grade. So it's exactly the same type of stuff that if you were to go into one of these infusion centers where they will give you vitamins or nutrients or things through your veins, and you were to get a glutathione injection, and they do that. And I understand from talking to Dr. Zinni that the cheapest price is about $600 a whack. But if you go in, that's the same sort of quality that you're getting that you start with. We start in making that product with pharmaceutical grade glutathione. So you're not looking at anything that is inferior. As a matter of fact, the purity of the water that is used in that GlutaMyst is twice as pure as the water that is needed or required by law to be in something that's going to go into a human vein. There's a way of measuring purity of water. It is because when you take out all the other things out of water, water does not conduct electricity very well. And so they measure the purity of water by the resistance of water to electricity. And in order to have an IV fluid, you have to have a purity of what is called 10 megaohms resistance. And in the case of the GlutaMyst that you have an 18 mega ohm resistance purity of the water that you start with. Now, we're not actually purifying it simply to make sure that there's nothing in there that we don't need. We're purifying it so that the water becomes extremely avid to pick up anything good that we're going to put in it. In this case, the glutathione and the phytonutrients that, not phyto, but the nanonutrients that we are putting in to supply everything the body requires. Now, with the GlutaMyst and with the XanthoMyst, you're covering all of the body compartments because the mangosteen as an antioxidant, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but as an antioxidant, the primary site of action is extracellular. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work inside cells. It does, but it's primarily in the areas of the body which are acellular. And that's the lymph, the plasma, the interstitial fluid, and then they have transcellular fluids, and there's all kinds of things like that. When you just read the words and the names of those, you'll realize that they are areas where it would be very, very good to have some antioxidant activity. And, if anybody's ever had a sore joint, understands what happens when synovial fluid becomes overwhelmed, either with an infectious agent or simply with inflammation. So the primary site of the XanthoMyst is outside the body cells, and the primary site of action of the GlutaMyst is inside. Now, can we go to the next slide? Maybe we can look at this a little bit easier. Okay, now just a minute, Tom. I've got to switch up my slide here as well. Right. Now, this is not a cell. I don't know whether the person who made the slide was intending it to be a cell or not. It's very true, and it looks, it could be a cell, but what it is it's an organelle. That means one of the teeny, teeny, teeny organs that every cell has, just like the body has organs, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, etc. The cells themselves have corresponding organelles, meaning something very much smaller, obviously, that do the same thing for the cell that those organ systems do for the body in general. And so now we're looking at what are called mitochondria. And the mitochondria, and they exist by the billions in our cells, are the power plants. It's simplification to a certain degree to call them only power plants, but they are where the food that we take in is turned into energy. So they're the generators, the energy parts of the cell. And if you happen to follow the kinds of philosophical bases for medicine that I follow, which is not what the vast majority of doctors follow. I believe, for example, that cancer is a metabolic disease principally. It is not something that is the result of a somatic mutation of the DNA. That is downstream. That's one of the end parts of it. But unfortunately, we can't convince the multi-billion-dollar organizations who are making all their money from the idea that it's the other way around, that they're wrong. But they are wrong, in my opinion. And where the diseases of the body largely begin, and particularly cancer, begins with the breakdown of the mitochondria. It happens when the mitochondria can no longer protect themselves against the assaults that they have to face every instant. And the commonest of those assaults is the fact that when you take carbohydrate and you pass it through the Krebs citric acid cycle and the electron transport system, you produce as exhaust water and oxygen. Now, it doesn't sound like water or oxygen would be a bad thing to have in any circumstances, but when the oxygen is around and it's free, it's going to latch onto something and become what is called a free radical. And free radicals damage normal tissue. And that is why we have, and that process is called the process of oxidation. It's the oxygen paradox. You can't live without oxygen, but if you've got too much of it in the wrong places, you're going to die from the effects of oxidation. And, you know, a piece of metal rusts because of oxidation. A sliced apple turns brown because of oxidation. All fruits rot because of oxidation. And in the case of the mitochondria, there is the primary source in the human body, which comes from its natural function of free radicals. And if you do not have adequate antioxidants around, you're not going to be able to protect the insides of the cells, protect the mitochondria themselves, and then by extrapolation, protect anything in the body. So it is important, I think, to know and understand that the manufacture of ATP, or the energy molecule of the body, is something that produces at the same time this exhaust of oxygen, which can become very, very dangerous and free radicals to the point where it'll destroy the machinery that it is making the making the energy with, and everything else. Now, I can also make a clear statement to you now, rather than well, no, I'm going to wait till the next couple of slides and we'll talk about that. So what I'm saying is that aging possibly should be considered a disease, because if you think about it, it has so many of the elements of disease, and disease becomes more common as you age when your defenses against disease from the outside world start to break down. So aging really is a disease state in my mind. And the disease state starts with the oxidation that is unable to be deflected, absorbed, or removed by antioxidants. So we're talking about a theory of aging here. And the man who had this idea was called Denham Harmon, I believe. And he, about 1956, came up with the idea that the damage from aging inside cells was principally the result of the cells themselves producing antioxidants, which they had inadequate oxidants, for which they had inadequate antioxidant protection. And that was the reason why tissues broke down, organs broke down, and death and aging ensued. So it really is key. Now, since Denham Harmon, way back in 1956, and most of you weren't even born then, since he came out with that theory, we have learned oodles of things that are different and more complex than his theory about the theories of aging. There are now over 20 theories of aging that are out there. And the cool thing about those theories of aging, and it may be the telomere theory of aging, or it may be the program theory of aging, and it could be any one of them, they bring tremendous amounts of knowledge to the process of aging. But, and here's the key, it's too hard, and none of them have practical interventions that will make a whit of difference in the lives of most people, because there is no practical application to that. Well, with old Denham Harmon's theory, there is a very, very practical way of dealing with it. First of all, the antioxidant system of the body itself, which is called the endogenous antioxidant system, that is very, very strong and is able to carry on replacing and renewing and throwing out the free radicals and renewing again. So that's very, very important. And that's that's the part of the system that we are helping with the glutathione, because the glutathione is part of the antioxidant system of the body, which is called endogenous, the part that belongs and is made by the body. Now, the exogenous antioxidants that we can take in, and here you're talking about your vitamins A, C, D, E, for example, are excellent antioxidants, and the mangosteen antioxidants, the xanthones, which exist in no other plant and which are only found in the mangosteen. And by the way, there are over 70 potent antioxidants in the mangosteen alone. And plants are full of antioxidants because if you think about it, plants respire or breathe in carbon dioxide. So the poison that they're trying to avoid is oxygen. Therefore, they have extremely effective evolved elements which will hold oxygen under control and prevent the damage that oxygen could do theoretically to plants. So we're strengthening both the endogenous, because the glutathione has often been called the master antioxidant of the body. So we're helping that. And then the exogenous antioxidants that we can take in, and which we do take in through food, will come to us in this magic little plant called the mangosteen. Again, 80 very powerful, different antioxidants working in your body, with your body, to be able to control the damage that leads to aging and disease. So all of these wonderful theories really do help us. Nice to know about telomeres, but try and change one. No practical way to do it. And so the few interventions that we can make that are excellent and that are efficient have to do with nutrition and supplementation, in my mind. Now, I'm just going to poke another screen up here. Next slide. Now, Tom, this is the slide I'm going to kind of enlarge a little bit, just a minute. This talks about conditions which are associated with low glutathione. Well, I'm going to blow those up and say, guess what? There is not a single disease condition that you can name, not a single one, not even something which is supposedly 100% genetic, such as sickle cell anemia, for example. Not even in those genetic diseases do you not have something called a redox imbalance. And what is a redox imbalance? Well, it means that you have not got enough antioxidants, and that under those disease states, there is an increased production of free radicals from the disease process itself, not from normal body function like we were talking about with the mitochondria, but from the disease process itself. There will be productions of free radicals. And so you have an imbalance, an unbalanced redox state. And homeostasis, or another medical word for balance, is extremely important in the body. And any disease state is an attack on homeostasis. And any antioxidant taken into the body effectively and put into place is a blow against that imbalance in favor of disease. So while we've got neurological diseases and immune diseases, and put the next slide up if you would. And here you got cardiovascular diseases and cancer and other pancreatic inflammatory diseases. Like I'm telling you, there is not a single disease that does not benefit from more antioxidants getting into the body than would be there under any given disease state. So that's the story for tonight. And I guess we can do questions. The benefits are there. Just take a look at those slides. That's only half the benefits. But I'm tired, Tom.
Okay. I actually feel like I've been to a science class. Uh, I
Well,
am so
I hope some of it is, I hope most of it is at a level that we could understand. If it's not, go to AI and ask AI. Don't ask AI any moral or ethical questions. They're all screwed up because the people that programmed it are screwed up. But you can certainly ask it factual questions about science, and you can get a lot of information in there that is very, very enlightening.
let me stop sharing here for just a moment and go to some of the chat just to read through here for a minute. Let's see.
Boy, we had a fantastic conversation the other night with a doctor who just came on board. Really an exciting conversation. I wish you could have all heard it.
Okay, I only see one that had to do with I was told if cancer, do not talk glutathione. Is this true?
No, it's not true. And it's a simplistic point of view. First of all, if you ever see simplistic points of view, these are the things you need to be aware of in life. And I'm saying this as a guy at the end of life because, everything in my body is winding down, but my brain is not. And my experience is not. And one of the things I will say to you is beware of experts. They've always been bad to listen to. And, I've said that even though many people have considered me an expert in my area of knowledge. But the fact is that data is now the most important commodity in the world, and that information is changing so rapidly that nobody could be an expert except temporarily. And therefore, don't believe people who make bald statements about always, never, shouldn't, couldn't, can't. The half-life of medical knowledge now is only about 18 months. And that means that everything that's true now in medicine will not be true, or at least half of it will be gone in 18 months from now. So don't believe experts. And if you hear anybody give some kind of bald statement like that, it's wrong, because simplistic, stupid statements are wrong, just generally. Glutathione, how is it going to make cancer worse? That's the question you ask them back. Tell me, how is the glutathione going to make cancer worse? And they won't be able to answer you.
Nope. There's another question about some customers aren't noticing anything. And I always say, a lot of major diseases, you don't even know that you may have a major disease for 5 or 6 years down the road.
Well, let me use an example that I've used before that will help understand that. I actually played golf with a guy 2 hours before he died. Okay. Now, he didn't die because he lost. He did lose, but that wasn't why he died. For about 15 to 20 years, he'd been living a lifestyle that was clogging his arteries and was leading to a heart attack. And he had the heart attack on the Saturday evening after he played golf, and he died. He was very dead, and it had nothing to do with anything that he did the day before, or even for many, many, many weeks, if not a long time in front of it. Cardiac disease, the diseases that kill most Americans, do not announce themselves like a bad cold. They come on insidiously, quietly, and they are present usually for a very long period of time before they become things that are threatening life and limb. Now, the example I would give you would be this. During the Second World War, there was a point where the Nazis got so angry at the British that they had what was called the Blitz. And they flew over London, and they bombed the hell out of London. They just dropped bombs everywhere. And London was razed. It was down to the ground. And if you went to London the day after the war was over, it still looked like a pretty awful place. Everything was broken. And it took years, literally, of cleaning away the rubble and beginning to build back up the city, which is there today. And that's the way it is with chronic disease in the body. If you start doing something right for your body, it may be that you'll notice the effects very quickly. I noticed the effect of the glutathione and the mangosteen together when I had double pneumonia and went to the conference. I went to the convention, and I was too sick to be at the convention. I shouldn't have gone, but I promised I would go. So I went, and in the morning, when I first went down to do my talk, I was so brain dead. First of all, I've been coughing my guts up all night in the room upstairs, but I was very, very sick. And when I got downstairs, I had brain fog that did not allow me to read my slides. I could not read my slides. Now, part of the problem was that the stage was 4 feet wide, and I was standing in the middle of my slides, which were as big as me. So that was one of the reasons I couldn't read them. But the other one was that I was really out of it. I was very, very sick. And they passed out the glutathione that morning, and I had the mangosteen with me. And I chunked in 20 shots in my mouth at 10 a piece each time. And then I went upstairs and I laid down. And I laid down for only about an hour, maybe, because I was late coming downstairs. Sandy called me and said, "Hey, there's a chair down here on the stage, and you're supposed to be in it answering questions with Dr. Zinni." And so I rushed down. But when I rushed downstairs, I felt great. I would have gone dancing after I finished that. And it was a question and answer period. And I was as sharp as I've ever been at any point in time in my life answering questions. And I think I did a good job. People came up to me afterwards and said nice things about my afternoon presentation. Not a single person said anything about the morning presentation because I was a zombie. And the only difference was that I took those two things when I was deathly sick. So when you're deathly sick, that's when you're likely going to, perhaps like I did, have some immediate effect. And that was the fastest effect that I had ever had from anything that was supplemental. In all the years that I'd used supplements, I'd never had an effect that had happened within an hour and a half. But I had had many effects that were slow coming and that were effective and let me, for example, I'm much younger than many of my peers who are now dead. I'm still alive and kicking, and I definitely believe that it's because of lifestyle and the fact that I supplement. So like London, if you've had chronic disease, bad life habits, etc., and you start to do the right stuff and start to take the right stuff, don't expect that overnight the rubble's going to be cleared away and skyscrapers will spring from the ground like mushrooms. It doesn't happen that way. Now, the other thing that is important in this regard, and I can say it, I think, because they can fire me if they don't like it, that is that this company is different than a lot of other companies. They are constantly willing to change. Matter of fact, I'd say that the single constant for CTFO is change. They're always trying to make something better. David D'Arcangelo, who is the director of new product development and a number of other things, he's got too many jobs. He calls me regularly to say, "Hey, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think about that?" And it's always progress, improvement of products currently in existence, the possible creation of other products complementary to what they have that would be coming on the market. So they're always moving forward. And that is very different than some of the other companies that I have worked for. A couple of them have been like being on on a roller coaster going the wrong way. So this is a good company. They are looking to improve their products, and they are doing that. And if suddenly something happens in the science world, or Dr. Templeman or Dr. Zinni or a couple of the other doctors on the advisory board come up with an idea, they will consider it and they will make changes if it's feasible. And your products will become better and better. But if you're not having any results with these products, I wouldn't recommend you try anybody else's products because they don't work as well as these do.
I think you sort of explained loading dose there when you said during the convention what you did. And we all saw that when you came back down, you were like 180 degrees turned around. So thank you for sharing that. I know we've had a few, looks like most of just comments from this point on. So I,
Don't tell me about the bad ones.
no bad ones. All good, all good. So yeah, I feel like I've been to a science class, and for those that want to listen to this recording again, we'll have it posted up probably by tomorrow on lifeasitcouldbe.com. And I'm gonna stop the recording just for a moment here because I want to share one more thing that's happening in just a few days. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.